Good morning, everyone. It is an incredible schos, Baruch Hashem, to be able to learn today's daf with all of you. I'm sorry that I cannot be there in person, but at least we have the opportunity, the great schos and merit Hashem, to be able to learn together virtually. So today's daf, is Mem Tes 49, and we are picking up on Mem Ches Beis 48b, 11 lines up from the bottom, right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Yes, 11 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Akiva. So just to reorient ourselves a little bit, if you remember again, already starting on Shabbos' daf, we became hyper-focused on the sugya of Meis Mitzvah, and specifically the ability for both a Kohen Gadol, and a Nazir, who both have the strictest restrictions of Tumah, to become Tamei for a Meis Mitzvah. So the Gemara, now once we kind of began with that discussion, the Gemara has broadened it into developing the series of drashas, both for Kohen Gadol as well as for Nazir. And again, we've kind of gone past just a simple discussion of Meis Mitzvah and really gotten into the wide world of Tumah in general. So the Gemara says as follows: Rabbi Akiva, and according to Rabbi Akiva, whose sheet we left off with in yesterday's daf, Gezer Shava de Rabbi Minole. Where does he learn Rabbi's Gezer Shava? Remember again, Rabbi had a Gezer Shava of Imo from Kohen Gadol to Nazir. This was on Memches Amud Aleph. And essentially the result of that Gezer Shava was the idea, as Rabbi said on the top of Amud Aleph, that Imo teaches me that it is only Tumas Meis that a Kohen and a Nazir are not permitted to become exposed to. But other forms of Tumah, like Zivos or like Tzara'as, if there is a need, ultimately, again, the restriction of Tumah would not apply. So Rabbi Akiva, where does he learn this out from? Amar Lacha, Kevan da Amar Mar, Im Haya Kohen Gadol v'Nazir la'echa v'Nazir. So let's listen to this. Following case, let's say you have a Kohen Gadol who's a Nazir. So what's the halacha? La'achiv eino metame, ava metame l'meis mitzvah. Ultimately, again, that word achiv teaches me that what? He can't become tamei for his brother, but he can become tamei for a meis mitzvah. So if that's the case, Mali Kohen Gadol l'chudei, Mali Nazir v'Kohen Gadol, what does it matter ultimately, again, if he's just a regular Kohen Gadol, or if he's a Kohen Gadol and a Nazir? In other words, therefore, again, according to this, the word imo is mufne. The word imo is open, and therefore, again, can be used for the Gezer Shava of Rabbi. Rabbi Shmuel, Kohen Gadol v'hu Nazir minale. According to Rabbi Shmuel, ultimately, again, from where does he know? From where does he know ultimately again about a Kohen Gadol and who is also a Nazir? Namely, again, how does Rabbi Shmuel know that a Kohen Gadol who's a Nazir has the ability to become Tamei for a Meis Mitzvah? Kevan deshar rachman echad lav gabe Meis Mitzvah, mali chad lav, mali train lavin. Very interesting drasha. Rabbi Shmuel says, once the Torah has already permitted one lav for the sake of a Meis Mitzvah, what does it matter if it's one lav or two lavin? In other words, that once we find that a Meis Mitzvah is mutter, in other words, that a Kohen Gadol is mutter to become Tamei for a Meis Mitzvah, and a Nazir is permitted to become Tamei for a Meis Mitzvah, so what does it matter if it's just a Kohen who's not a Nazir, or just a Nazir who's not a Kohen, or if he's a Nazir Kohen Gadol? Once one lav is mutter, or is matir, once one lav is permitted, so two lavim are also permitted. It's a very interesting drasha. But you should just know, this line is often used. Mali chad lav, mali train lavin. Just the difference over, it doesn't matter if it's one lav or two lavin. The difference over here is that the Gemara is using this as an argument to permit a mitzvah. Most times when we hear this line, it's not the Gemara coming to encourage me to do a mitzvah, but rather it's the Yetzer Hara encouraging me to continue to sin. Mali chad lav, mali train lav. You know, so the most dangerous tool of the Yetzer Hara is the creation of habit. You know, habit-forming behaviors are powerful, and habit-forming behaviors can be terribly detrimental. It all depends on what you're forming a habit for. Right? At the end of the day, if a person creates a habit for the performance of mitzvahs, incredible. But chas v'shalom, a person could also form a habit for the performance of averos, and when that happens, when a person becomes so habituated, so inclined, so predisposed to just sin, that's when the Yetzer Hara says, come on, you're so far into this already. Mali chadlav, mali trelav. And the beauty over here, as I just mentioned, is that the Gemara is using this profound phrase as an argument to allow a mitzvah of Meis Mitzvah, and not chas v'shalom, the commission of averos. Incredible. So the Gemara goes, Achoso lamali. What does Rabbi Shmuel do with Achoso? To which the Gemara says, Sagadait chamina Ki shara rachmana lemeis mitzvah Nazir v'kohen de iser lavi. Ava milo pesach de kares lo yitama lemeis mitzvah. It's actually very interesting. So remember again, what was the drasha from Achoso? So the drasha from Achoso was that if a person is on his way for Karban Pesach, or a person is on his way to do bris milah, and what happens? He hears that his sister passed away. So you might have thought that you should go back to the Levaya for your sister, become Tameh, and miss out on Pesach and Milah. Kamash Mala, no, assuming there's someone else to take care of that mitzvah, go do Pesach, go do Milah, that's your mitzvah. But if it was a mitzvah, then I'm obligated to go ahead and miss out, even on Pesach, even on Milah. So the Gemara says something amazing. The Gemara says, were it not for the drush of Achoso, I would have thought as follows. When is there a license to become Tameh for a mitzvah? That's when the Tumah at most results in a lav. In a lav, right? In a violation of prohibition. So for example, if a Kohen Gadol, or a Kohen for that matter, a regular Kohen, becomes Tameh of a mitzvah, that's a lav. Right? Now again, the lav is lifted for the performance of Meis Mitzvah. Nazir ultimately becomes the for a Meis Mitzvah, lav. I would have thought that only time Meis Mitzvah overrides an Aveira or an Isser is when it's an Isser lav. But when Meis Mitzvah is competing against something that carries with it an Isser kares, then perhaps Meis Mitzvah does not set aside the obligation. So for example, when it comes to Karban Pesach, failure to do the Karban Pesach ultimately, again, is an Isser Karis. Failure to get a bris milah is an Isser Karis. Now, just to be clear, the Rush points this out. The Isser Karis of milah is not on the father for failure to perform, nor is it obviously on the baby. The Isser Karis of milah is that once a person becomes an adult and he did not yet have a bris milah, failure to take care of a bris milah for himself ultimately could result in Karis. The point over here is, both Milah and Milah and Pesach are mitzvos which carry with them a penalty of kares. So this is incredible. So were it not for the drasha of Achoso, I would have thought the only time that Meis Mitzvah trumps another obligation, another mandate, is when that mandate is no more severe than a lav. But if that mandate carried with it an Isser Kares, perhaps Meis Mitzvah does not trump it, Kamash Mula no. Kamashmal, that Meis Mitzvah trumps everything, even Karban Pesach and even Bris Milah. Incredible. Such an incredible Gemara. We'll say good. Top of Memtes. Ul Rabbi Akiva, and according to Rabbi Akiva, Michti lo shna kohen gadol luchudei v'lo shna kohen gadol du Nazir. So remember again, according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no distinction whether we're talking about over here a regular kohen gadol or a kohen gadol who's a Nazir. Right? Either way, we learn out the license to become Tameh for a mitzvah from Nafka Mela Achiv. Right? So again, remember, according to Rabbi Akiva, both for a Nazir, both for a Kohen Gadol, or a Kohen Gadol is a Nazir, all are not from the same thing. Achiv. Achiv teaches me that although neither a Kohen Gadol, nor a Nazir, nor Nazir Kohen Gadol can become Tameh for anyone, Achiv teaches me that they can become Tameh ultimately again for a Meis Mitzvah. If that's the case, La'aviv uli imo lamali. So what do I need Aviv and imo by Kohen Gadol? According to Rabbi Akiva, what do those words teach me? So the Gemara says, Srichi, I'll tell you why it's necessary. Di kasiv Aviv, because if it would have just said Aviv, Hava mina hainu taima. I'm sorry, apparently I have technical difficulties all the time. All right, in any event, so the Gemara says as follows. So tzrichi, the ikas of Aviv, hava amina, hainu taima, delo metamile, mishum techazaka ba'almohu. So the Gemara says as follows. I would have thought like this. Okay, so the Gemara, I'm sorry, Chevra. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows. The ikas of Aviv, if it would have just said Aviv, Hava Amina Hainu Taima Metamele, I would have thought that the reason ultimately, again, it's not Metame, right? He can't be Metame, is why Mishum de Chazaka Ba'amos. Okay, so let's take a step back. So here's what we know. Okay. Here is what we know. So I know that Halacha L'Maisa, Achiv teaches me that a Kohen Gadol is permitted to become Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. He can't become Tameh to his brother, can't become Tameh to his family, but he can become Tameh to a Meis Mitzvah. So here's the Shaila. What do I learn from Aviv? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. The ikas of aviv, had the Torah just said aviv, had it just said aviv, havamina, hainu taimed delom etamile, mishum techazaka ba'amu. This is fascinating. Do you know why a Kohen, or Kohen Gadol, can't become tummy to his father? You know why? This is incredible. It's going to sound a little bit strange, but how does a person know that his father is his father? Right? So the way a person knows it, I know this sounds a little bit strange, is chazaka. What does it mean, chazaka? So the chazaka says that halacha l'maisa, this person is my father. If you look at the Rosh, so actually first look at Rashi. Rashi says tzrichidi kasav rachmana la'aviv v'lo li'imo hava amina la'aviv hu de'enu metamim mishum delo breira milsa iavuahu techazaka ba'almahu. I don't know. How does a person know that his father is his father? It's a chazaka. Now, what does that mean? It's a chazaka. If you go right across to the Rosh says tirov be'ilos achar habal. The Rosh says the logic is because, and this is incredible, we assume that even if chas v'shalom, a woman was not faithful to her husband, and even God forbid had she engaged in some type of extramarital affair, the majority of acts of relations still took place with her husband. And therefore there's a concept of rov be'ilos achar habal. The majority of relations, the majority of acts of relations, go ahead and go after the husband. So again, I don't think that it's kedai like to put this on a Father's Day card. Like I don't think, happy birthday, Father, who's my father, because it's a chazaka, rov be'ilos achar habal. But from a halachic perspective, it's interesting, right? A father, because again, we're going to see contrast this with a mother, where it's clear who one's mother is, right? That's obvious and clear. But lamaisa, when it comes to a father, it's a din in rov be'ilos achar habal. It's a chazaka. It's a chazaka that my father is my father. So the Gemara says, I might have thought like this. When is it that a Kohen Gadol can't become tamei? What kind of parent? The father. Why? Because his father is his father al chazaka. Al chazaka. Aval imo diadinin diyalarete l'tamei. But a mother who's a parent clearly much more than just the chazaka, right? Ultimately, again, he was a parent because, again, the child always knows who his mother is. Perhaps the Kohen Gadol should become tamei for her. To which the Gemara says, therefore it has to say imo. Because of Rachmana imo. And if it would have just said imo, hava amina imo lo litamila. Why can't the Kohen Gadol become tamei for his mother? Delav ozil zar'a basra. Because remember, Judaic identity, or more appropriately, tribal identity, as well as inheritance identity, is not created through the mother. Rather, it's only created through the father. So I might have thought that's why a Kohen can't become tamei for his mother. Pasuk says, how was your mishpacha? How was your tribal identity created? How is your inheritance identity created? Through your father. Therefore, perhaps you should become tamei for your father. Kamash malan, no. Kamash malan, that you can't become tamei for your father. So therefore, I will say it's actually very interesting. So now here's what I have. I have achiv, right? Achiv teaches me in the pasuk that halacha l'maaseh you can't become tamei for your brother, but you can become tamei for a meis mitzvah, right? Imo, right? Aviv teaches me that I can't become tamei for my father. Why would you have thought that you should become tamei for your father? Because halacha l'maaseh identity is established through the father. So I might have thought for my father I should become tamei. Kamash malon, no. And then it says imo. Why? Because imo is the one, your mother is the one parent definitively is your parent. Your father is your father because of chazaka of rov be'ilos achar habal. So I might have thought it's tafka, not the father you can be tamei for, but mother you can. Kamash malon, you can't become tamei for your mother. So therefore I will say, what the Gemara is demonstrating over here is that halacha l'maaseh, we really had to spell it out by each of the relatives for the Kohen Gadol. If that's the case, va'al kol nafshos meis lo yavo lamali. So then why do I need a general statement, right? So now I will say, so now that I understand why I need achiv, I understand why I need aviv, I understand why I need imo. So why do I need the general statement of al kol nafshos meis lo yavo, that he can't come in contact with the dead lamali? So I'll say Amud Beis, Mem Tesa 49b, al kol, this is fascinating, al kol lafuke rechokim. So this is very interesting. Al kol comes to exclude non-relatives. You can't become tamei for non-relatives. Mace, lafuke krovim, comes to exclude relatives. Nafshos, what is nafshos plural? What does that come to exclude? We actually saw this before. Lafuke, revius dam shiyatza mishne mesim shemetame ba'ohel. So we know that Allah Lamaisa, if there is a revius of blood, it has the ability to convey tuma via ohel. Now the interesting part about that is, what happens if you have a revius, but the revius comes from two different corpses? Halach Lamaisa, they combine, the two revisim combine to form the shear, to form the prohibited shear, ultimately again for tuma. How do I know this? Shene'emar akol nafshos meis lo yavo, because the pasuk says akol plural, akol nafshos meis, on all nafshos, mean even if there's a revius of blood that comes from two nafshos, that comes from two people, lo yavo. Now remember again, yavo, lashon of bia, refers to tumas ohel. So if you kind of bring this all together, we emerge with just an incredibly fantastic drasha. So the drasha, let's work backwards. Al kol nafshos meis lo yavo. What does that teach me? So al kol comes to teach you that a kohen gadol can't become tamei for rechokim. Meis, even for relatives, right? And then together, akol nafshos meis lo yavo, that even if there's a revius of dam that comes from two corpses, they combine to form a revius, and if a kohen gadol can't come into the same ohel as those two, as that combined revius. I will say the next part of the drasha, aviv imo. So achiv, so let's work backwards. Achiv teaches me that as much as a kohen gadol cannot become tamei for a relative, he can become tamei for a meis mitzvah. And then aviv and imo, again, had you said one, you wouldn't have understood the other, right? Had it just said mother, had it just said father, I would have said for the father you can't become tamei because halacha l'maisa, my father is only my father because of chazaka, but for mother you can. Therefore it says imo can't become tamei for imo either. And had it just said imo, I would have thought my mother because tribal identity and inheritance identity is not forged for the mother. Therefore, it has to say aviv. So Rabbi say that is the totality of the pasuk, both by Nazir and both by kohen gadol. We now have a fully rounded out drasha for both of these situations. And Rabbi say, before we begin the next Mishnah, what I do want to come back and mention is, what about the original case of the Mishnah? Remember again, what was the case of the Mishnah? The Mishnah is talking about a Nazir, right? A kohen gadol and a Nazir who are walking together. It's not a joke, right? It's not like a rabbi and a priest, right? Kohen gadol and a Nazir are walking together. They come across a meis mitzvah. Now remember, both of these individuals on their own have a license to become tamei for a meis mitzvah. Now the shaila is they're walking together. We don't need both of them to become tamei. Who should become tamei? So Rabbi say this is a machlokes in the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer says the Kohen should become tamei and not the Nazir. The Chachamim say the Nazir should become tamei and not the Kohen. And then so Rabbi say that's machlokes. So how do we paskin? So listen to this. So the Rambam paskins in Hilchos Nazirus Perek Zayin Halacha Yud Gimel. Here it is. Nazir v'Kohen shek pagu b'meis mitzvah. If you have a Nazir and a Kohen who both are walking together and they both came across a meis mitzvah. So what's the halacha? So Rabbi says, so now remember, we don't need both of them. We only need one of them. But yet both of them have the ability to become tamei. As in other words, differently. Both of them have the individual halachic license to become tamei for a meis mitzvah, despite their elevated state of personalistic kedusha. So who should become tamei? Rambam says, Yitami Nazir. The Nazir should become tamei, not the Kohen. Not the Kohen. Why? And here's the novelty. Remember, when a Nazir becomes tamei, number one, he loses all the Nazirs up until this point in time. Number two, he has to bring a carbon. So even though a Nazir loses all of his time that he's banked up until this point, and even though the Nazir has to go in and bring a carbon, he should still become tamei and not the Kohen. Why? Here it is. Shezeh kiddushaso kiddushas sha'a va'afilu haya Nazir olam va'kohen kiddushaso kiddushas olam. This is incredible because the Nazir is episodic kiddusha, and the Kohen has ongoing or really systemic, right, constant kiddusha, right? And now, by the way, even though the Rambam points out there is such a thing as a Nazir olam, right, an eternal Nazir, but the idea is the concept of Nazirus is that it's a limited term Kedusha, as opposed to Kedushas Kahuna, which is an ongoing Kedusha. Therefore, again, the Rambam understands that the Kedusha of a Kohen is really a greater heightened level of Kedusha than the Kedusha ultimately of the Nazir. The Nazir's Kedusha is episodic. The Kedusha of the Kohen is systemic and eternal and ongoing. Therefore, better for the Nazir to become Tameh, ultimately again, than the Kohen. If you think about it, by the way, also like even from a Hashkafic perspective, I think I mentioned this when we first started this sugya, which is if you think about the Kedusha of the Kohen and the Kedusha of the Nazir, so the truth is there's another distinction between them. So the Rambam understands it that it's the distinction of episodic versus ongoing Kedusha. It's also a difference between conferred Kedusha and what we'll call conferred Kedusha or innate Kedusha, right? Because again, if you think about it, that's not really even the right term. I guess the better term for it would be the Kedusha of Kahuna is innate Kedusha versus what we'll call the Kedusha of the Nazir is like an earned Kedusha. Not that right, the Nazir earned it, so to speak, by making the decision. So what's fascinating is as follows. Earned Kedusha, Nazir's Kedusha, because it could be earned, it could also be lost. Innate Kedusha can never be lost, right? Which is interesting. That's even why a Kohen, let's say a Kohen, for example, marries someone he's not allowed to. So he's puzzled, right? He's not allowed to go ahead and do the avoda. But the moment he divorces that woman, he's once again allowed to go and do the avoda, which is interesting. In other words, even by the kahuna, bad decisions do not go ahead and make him lose his kahuna-kite, right? His kahuna-ship. It's his. He may be temporarily blocked from executing or practicing with it, so to speak, but it's his. So it's just interesting. So I want to frame it a little bit different. So the Rambam is framing it as a tension between what we'll call episodic Kedusha, that's Nazirus, versus ongoing or eternal Kedusha, that's Kahuna. And therefore the Rambam says eternal Kedusha of Kahuna is greater than episodic Kedusha of Nazir. Therefore, if one of them has to become Tameh, the Nazir should become Tameh rather than the Kohen. But I think like a B'divrei Hashkafa, it's also teaching us something amazing. Kedusha of Kahuna is innate versus Kedusha of Nazirus, which is earned, right? So earned Kedusha can be lost, because after all, the Nazir could bring everything down, right, crashing down, versus Kedusha of a Kohen, which is eternal. But if you take this one step further, just B'divrei Hashkafa, if you think about it, so every Yid, every Jew, has these two levels of Kedusha, even aside from Nazir and Kohen. Every Jew has these two levels of Kedusha. Think about it for just a moment. We've spoken about this many times. I have two levels of Kedusha. On one hand, I have conferred Kedusha, innate Kedusha. This is the Kedusha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me by dint of the fact that I am a member of Klal Yisrael. I'm a Yid, I'm a Jew, I have Kedusha. I have Kedusha. Now, the truth is, every human being has Kedusha. But Lamaisa, a Jew has a different type of Kedusha, a different level of Kedusha. So therefore, again, I have this conferred innate Kedusha as a member of Am Yisrael. What did you do to earn it? Nothing. I was born, which wasn't even up to me, right? Like again, it was against my will, like the Mishnah in Ava says, Al Karchach Ata Nolad. So this is conferred Kedusha, and then throughout my life, I go and I try to kind of be like a Nazir, not become a Nazir, but be like a Nazir, meaning earned Kedusha. I try to do things that ultimately go ahead and fill me with Kedusha. But here's the incredible thing. I can make mistakes in life, and sometimes dramatic mistakes in life. And what's the result of those mistakes? I lose my earned Kedusha. It happens. Sometimes a person spends such a long time building up positive spiritual momentum, building up good spiritual momentum, and then what happens? I make a mistake, I make a bad decision, and I lose it all. But the incredible thing is, even when you lose, chas v'shalom, your earned Kedusha, you can never lose your conferred or innate Kedusha. That never goes away. That it doesn't matter how terrible your mistakes are, doesn't matter how terrible your missteps are, it doesn't matter how many wrong turns in life. A Yid can never lose his innate Kedusha. And the reason why this is important is because this is the very source of tshuva. Why is tshuva possible? Right? No matter how heinous a mistake, no matter how heinous a avera I commit, tshuva is always possible. Why is tshuva possible? Because although I could totally divest myself of my earned Kedusha, I could divest myself of my Kedushas Nazir, so to speak. But every single Yid has a Kedushas Kehuna. I have that innate Kedusha, and that can't touch it. Can't touch it, right? It's there. It's yours. It's yours forever. No matter how terrible it is, and because it's mine forever, that's why when I choose to get my act together in life and do tshuva, I could tap into that innate, conferred Kedusha. That Kedusha Kadosh Baruch Hu gave me. And I can build off that. So it's halacha l'maisa, halacha l'maisa. The Nazir should become tamei over the Kohen. And by the way, there's even a Kohen hedyot. Because the Nazir's Kedusha is episodic or earned versus the Kohen's Kedusha, which is eternal and ongoing, conferred and innate. It's true halacha l'maisa and it's true hashkafa l'maisa. Hashkafa l'maisa, you could lose your Kedushas Nazir. You could lose your earned Kedusha. Just when you build it up, you can demolish it and take it down. But you never lose your Kedushas Kehuna. You never lose your innate Kedusha. That's yours forever. And when I choose to turn my life around, to start to live differently, think differently, behave differently, that's my foundation. That's the platform upon which I begin to rebuild myself. Incredible. Incredible. I'll say, look at the halacha inside. Hilchos Nazirus, Perek Zayin Halacha Yudches. Weiter. Brand new Mishnah. There's nothing like a brand new Mishnah on a Monday. Incredible. Mem Tes Samad Beis, 49b. 4 lines down. Oh, I wish I was there with you live for this. Such an exciting daf. Mem Tes Samad Beis, 4 lines down. Al Elu Tumos Hanazir Migaleach. Well, so now we're getting really into some of the other details. These are the following types of tumah that if a Nazir is exposed to them, he has to shave his head. Remember, again, Migaleach means he shaves his head, which also means, remember, it brings to a close his previous Neder Naziris. He loses the previous days. He brings a carbon. Good. Cuts his hair. Starts all over again. Alames, number 1, a corpse. Number 2, kizayis min ames. Literally a kizayis from the mace, right? The kizayis of a corpse. Next, la kizayis netzel. Netzel, so we're going to talk about this, is like decomposing flesh. When the body decomposes, it turns into like a, I don't know what the right term is, like a gooey type of substance. That's called netzel. Or amale tarvad rekev, or for a literally translated, a ladle full of corpse dust. A ladle full of corpse dust. Okay? Va'ala shedra, spinal cord. Gulgoles, skull. Aver min ames, or a limb from a corpse. Va'al aver min achai, or a limb from a person who's alive. Sheyesh alav basar karoi. As long as the limb has enough flesh on it, that what? That if in other words, that if the person were alive and that if the limb were still attached to the living person, the flesh would be able to regenerate. So I will say, this is very interesting. So remember again, Aver min ames means a limb that was taken from a dead body. That has the ability to go ahead and convey tumah. An Aver min achai, a limb taken from a living person, could also convey tumah, as long as the limb has enough flesh on it to be that if it were still attached to the person, the flesh would be able to regenerate. Again, we'll get into the details of that in the Gemara. Next, v'achatzi kavat somas, a half a kav of bones, also conveys tumah. Chatzi lug dam, a half a lug of blood. Rashi points out over here that a half a lug of blood ultimately again is 2 revios, 2 revesim. Okay, so we'll say almagon, va'almasan, ve'alahilan. In all of these cases, so we'll say, so right, so let's go through the cases again. Corpse, kizayis of a corpse, kizayis of netzel, that gooey stuff that this flesh decomposes into, right? Next, a ladle full of corpse dust, spinal cord, spinal column, right? Skull, an aver, a limb from a corpse, or a limb from a living person that has enough flesh on it that it will be able to regenerate. Half a kav of bones, half a lug of dam. All of these things, Rabbi say, al magon, al masan, the al ahilan. If you touch them, if you carry them even without direct contact, or if you are under the same roof with any of these items, ultimately they convey tumah. They convey tumah. Next, so we'll say that's first category. Category 2, al etzem kisaura. If you have a bone fragment that's the size of a barley kernel, right, of a barley kernel, al mago va'amaso. You become tamei if you touch it or if you carry it. But I will say, but again, not tumas ohel, right? So if you're under the same roof as a tiny bone fragment, right, that is not going to convey tumah. Al elu hanazir migaleach. So I will say, in all of these cases, the Nazir cuts his hair. So remember again, cutting his hair means, let's see, he cuts his hair. Later he has to start all over again. He cuts his hair. Umaza b'shlishi b'shvi. Rabbi saying, remember again, this is tumas meis. Because it's tumas meis, therefore again he needs purification process. Purification process with what? With the paraduma. That is a 7-day process that has sprinklings on day 3 and day 7. The sosras hakolmin, and remember he loses all of the previous days that he observed as part of his Nazirus. Ve'eno maschil limnos ella ad shitar, and ultimately again he does not begin the new count of Nazirus until the purification process is complete. Umevi es karbonosov, and he brings his karbonosa as well. Beautiful. We'll say, let's analyze a lot to unpack over here. A lot to unpack. Says the Gemara. We'll say this is an incredible piece. Tan Rabbanon. Achar petiras al shal Rabbi Meir. After Rabbi Meir died, Amar Rabbi Huda said to his students, the Talmidav. So we'll say Rabbi Meir died, and Rabbi Huda was a contemporary of Rabbi Meir. Says to his students, Al yikansu tamidei Rabbi Meir lekan. The students of Rabbi Meir are not permitted to enter into my shir, to my base medrash. Ooh, why not? Mipnei shekantarenheim, because they are contrarians. They're difficult personalities. For lo lilmod Torah boin, they don't come to learn. Ella lekabcheni b'halachos boin. They're only coming to go ahead and refute my statements. So I'll say, what Rabbi Huda was saying was like this. Generally, people ask questions in 2 different ways. I should say in 3 different ways. There are some people who go ahead and ask questions because they genuinely want to understand. There are some people who ask questions because they just like to hear themselves speak. And there's a third category of people who like to ask questions just because they enjoy being argumentative. You can even tell them the answer. I told you the answer. Here's the answer. But to keep going and going and going and going. Why? Because some people just like the sport of argument. They just, whatever floats your boat, right? They enjoy it. They enjoy it. So watch this. So apparently, Rabbi Meir's Talmidim were known to be like a shtickle, like nudnik, like this. Their goal was to refute, right? Their goal was to challenge. Their goal, in other words, not to get information, not to learn, but really to be argumentative. So when Rabbi Meir dies, Rabbi Huda now realizes, these Talmidim are going to be looking for a new Rebbe. Rabbi Huda says to his Talmidim, do not let these guys in the base medrash. They're just going to cause problems. Okay, so watch this. Dachak sumchus v'nichnas. So Rabbi says, sure enough, one of Rabbi Meir's Talmidim, actually one of his primary Talmidim, a young man by the name of Sumchus, managed to get his way into the base medrash. The nichnas, Amar Lahem. So Rabbi says, so now what happens? Amar Lahem, he said, Kach shani Rabbi Meir. So Sumchus goes ahead and relays one of the teachings of Rabbi Meir. And what does he say? Al elu tumos hanazir migaleach. So Sumchus says, my Rabbi Meir taught us the following. For the exposure to the following types of tumah, the Nazir has to cut his hair and begin his whole Neder Nazirus again. What types of tumah? Al ames, corpse, al kizayis min ames, and al kizayis of mace. So watch this. Rabbi Huda loses it. Kas Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda got angry and he said to his Talmidim, Lo kach amarti lachem, didn't I tell you? Al yikansu Talmidei Rabbi Meir lekan, didn't I tell you that I don't want the students of Rabbi Meir coming into the base medrash? You know why? All they do is they come to cause problems. They're contrarians. They're difficult. They just like to ask questions. What, Rabbi Huda? What are you getting so upset about? Al kizayis min ames migaleach. So I will say, I want to point out to you something amazing. It's clear from this Gemara that Rabbi Huda himself had a different version of the Mishnah. Again, the Rush points this out. You see, the Rabbi Huda's reaction is not going to make that much sense to us. Why? Because what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah, when it went through the various things that create a tumah exposure, said, number 1, mace, number 2, kizayis min mace. Now I will say, Rabbi Huda didn't have this version. The way Rabbi Huda taught this halacha was kizayis min ames. That's it. What's the logic? If a kizayis min ames, if a kizayis of a corpse makes a nazir tameh and ultimately brings to a halt his whole neder nazir, so it goes without saying what? It goes without saying that a mace, that a whole mace, an intact corpse, of course, goes ahead and conveys tumah. So I'll say, a very interesting distinction. So Rabbi Huda, so what happens? This is fascinating. So Sumchus comes in and he says, my Rabbi Meir taught us that the way to read the Mishnah is Mace and Kizayis Min HaMace. Rabbi Yehuda says, ridiculous. This is what I told you. That's not the Mishnah. The Mishnah just says Kizayis Min HaMace, and once it says Kizayis Min HaMace, then what? It's obvious that, of course, a mace in its totality will convey Tumah as well. So again, Kas Rabbi Yehuda, the last two lines. What's the last line? Baptism base. Kas Rabbi Yehuda got angry and he said, "Amar lohem, lo kach amarti lechem." I told you so. Didn't I tell you this? Not to allow the students of Rabbi Meir into the base medrash. Al yikanzu tamidi Rabbi Meir lekan b'bnei shekantarin hein al kizayis min hameis migaleach al hameis lokol shekain. Didn't I tell you again? If you're going to become tamei, ultimately, again, through a kizayis min hameis, then does it have to say from the mace at all? So I will say, I'm going to leave you a little bit on a cliffhanger over here. So I will say, so this was the showdown. This was the dramatic showdown in the base medrash that occurred. Absolutely amazing. Again, I'm going to leave you mid-story. Resolution, Emir Hashem, we will do together. Emir Hashem on Tuesday when I'm back live in Mirat Hashem. So I will say we'll stop over here for today. And tremendous yashakayach to everyone. Shkach, I will say I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you in person, Baruch Hashem, for good reasons, but I miss you. I look forward to Mirat being back in the basement. Should everyone come Tuesday morning? Shkach, everyone. I'm gonna do now Mirat Hashem Chovas Halavavos, and we'll do it in Mirat Hashem on a separate video. Shkach, everyone.